Hi, everybody. My name is Shawn Burgess. I'm the author and creator of The Tear Collector. This is my debut novel, and it was just published in December of 2019. It's been a really exciting journey to get it out into the world and get some reader reactions coming into the book. It's been really exciting to watch. This book originally started out as a request from my oldest son, Brooks, to write him a book. So while I failed miserably at writing him an age-appropriate book, we ended up with a Tear Collector, which I think is a really fun read, and I can't wait for more readers to get to enjoy this story. But I want to thank Joe Compton for having me on a show and featuring the Tear Collector. I'm definitely really grateful. So thank you, Joe. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the read.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Fandom Forum. Season 2 has begun, and I'm super excited to start off this new season with an incredible, incredible piece of literature. Kind of a paranormal, I wouldn't even say it's horror, but it's paranormal thriller-esque, and it is by the wonderful Shawn Burgess. It is called The Tear Collector, and I have a great bunch of people here.
So, hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Roche, and I'm the host of Books and Buds, a YouTube book review channel. I have a book coming out through RhetAskew Publishing called Corpse Lily. And later this year, I'm also releasing a novella in the Askew Ever After box set. It's a romance box set, and keep your eye out for it. It's available for pre-order now, and there's 99 cents for 26 wonderful stories.
Hey, guys. I'm Jennifer Soucy. I also have a book coming out from RhetAskew, but that'll be next year. And next month, my debut novel is coming out through Giles Press called Demon in Me. And I've just been a lifelong horror fan, and I love creepy, spooky things and dark fiction. So this book was perfect for me.
Hey guys, I'm Shauna McGuiness, and I got a book out on Amazon, Frankie in Paris. I'm a playwright, I write children's theater, and I'm in query hell right now, trying to find an agent for my latest book that is all ready to go. Also, huge fan of horror and of Shawn, of course.
So the blurb reads as follows. It reads, when a young autistic girl goes missing from a small Appalachian community, the residents of Harper Pass descend into chaos. Brooks Raker and his friends stumble upon the police investigation, and as they dig deeper into the mysterious events, the boys realize the fate of their missing classmate pales in comparison with the evil lurking in the shadows of the quiet little town. With 4 boys who believe something sinister is at work, an ambitious reporter breathing down his neck, Detective Holt of Harbor Pass Police Department must confront his doubts and follow the evidence. A chain of disappearances and suspicious deaths lead Holt to the doorsteps of a mysterious, reclusive Professor Wadlow, who may know exactly what has come to collect in Harbor Pass.
It's just perfect. It introduces most of the main characters, Detective Holt and the boys. And then, of course, Margot Combs, who is the girl that's missing. Those are the main characters that you need to know about. So it was a great blurb.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. It pulled me in before I read it. I loved it.
Nice.
Yeah, I also wanted to say, besides the blurb being really awesome, Shawn had a fantastic marketing campaign where he was like posting, like, it looked like a real news article about like the missing girl Where is she? Can everyone help? And between that and the blurb, I mean, it just seems so real that you couldn't help but be drawn in, especially if you already kind of like this type of genre.
Yeah. It was very realistic to that marketing campaign because I took part in it, and I was very careful to make sure to announce it was just for a fiction novel
Right.
because I didn't want people to think it was an Amber Alert.
That's what
No,
it
yeah,
looked
it was
like.
really realistic. It was awesome.
They did a good job.
That's great. That's awesome. So to get into the book a bit here, we kind of like Daniel mentioned, we get introduced to Brady and his couple of his buddies who have stumbled upon this weird thing that happens in the woods, and then we skip ahead about 6 years to the middle school aspect of Brooks and his buddies, and then we get a kind of a sense right off the bat of the kind of person that Brooks is, because we're introduced to a couple of you hate to say antagonists because they're really, but they are at the very beginning, and that's Sammy and Myron, and they're introduced right here with giving some character development to Brooks. And this is kind of the theme of this book, is that more characters seemingly come in, and they're introduced in similar ways. You get a little bit of who they are, and then you understand why they're part of this story, right? And that's kind of an interesting way to approach it. And I'm curious if, for all of you, how you felt about that, and how much you right away connected to Brooks because of the way that he introduces him.
Oh gosh, I loved Brooks right away because of his care for Margot. Like, middle school kids can be kind of self-involved, and this kid could have just gone on with whatever, but he was legit caring about about Margot, and I liked that. I loved him right away because of that.
Nice.
Yeah, he was very relatable. For me, is the reason I like young adult fiction is because it kind of brings back memories for me, and this book did it brilliantly. It did it with books that I've read as a child, and it's also in movies I've watched as a child. Joe and I, before we popped on, were discussing The Goonies, and he had mentioned Stand By Me, both movies that I loved very much. So it brought back memories of those. But right away, he introduces just the need to find friends and companionship, and that's where we were introduced to the characters Robbie and T. And also, as a young boy, growing up in a small town, we faced bullies in our neighborhood, and you had to learn to either skirt around them or face them head on. So the second we're introduced to Sammy and Myron, I could just totally relate to Brooks. And it was a good, well-developed character within a couple of chapters.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't take much time in giving. I mean, he doesn't info dump or give you a bunch of background, and we really start from the moment that this whole thing starts, which is very impressive.
Right.
This book, right from the very beginning, had a cinematic feel to it. Like, I could picture everything like on a movie screen, right in my head to the movie screen of what was going on. I mean, there was such, and yet he never uses one adjective to describe a person's characteristics. You don't know their nationalities. You don't know anything about them in physical form, but you have such an emotional connection to them. And then it's so easy to visualize this, in my opinion. What do you guys think about that idea? Was it very cinematic for you as well in that experience?
Oh, I agree. And I totally loved the first chapter. I don't know if it was the first chapter or prologue, but the part with Brady, who ended up being one of my favorite characters. But like that whole scene with the caterpillars in the trees and how they just wanted to do a good thing. And when I grew up in Connecticut, in a heavily wooded area, we had like trees like that too. And we used to hang out in the woods, and those caterpillars are always so nasty. And we'd always hear, oh, they're going to destroy the trees and whatever. So it totally made sense to me, everything that he did, even though, of course, it went horribly wrong. And then when we go forward to the other kids, to Brooks and his friends, who hasn't had friends I hope everyone has had friends like that when they were a kid. Friends that they would just run around in their own little gang and not only look out for each other, but it's like they're kind of looking out for their neighborhood too.
Yeah, I really loved how the kids, the banter between them, it really captured the age group and was super relatable. And when Dev shows up on the scene, they just immediately kind of gather him into the fold, and he's part of all the ribbing too. And even in some kind of like dire situations throughout the novel, they have some really funny teenage boy banter. I thought that was really, really fun.
Right. And to Joe's point earlier about not using description, I don't want to name the mention of the novelist, mention his name or anything else, but I remember reading about half of a very well-known book, and the whole time in my head, I thought the female lead was a brunette. And come halfway through the book, he describes her as being blonde. So that kind of threw me off a little bit. So for a writer to be able to kind of not give you any description at all, you're able to form that description in your own head and carry on that way. And I think the way that Shawn was able to do that was through dialogue mostly, because most of his descriptions were just the scenery and the setting. And it just worked out perfectly for me. He just figured out a way, put a perfectly good 3D character, a bunch of them, on the pages, and it was really easy to get an image of, like Joe was saying, of a cinematic movie in my head.
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned Goonies and Stand By Me, Stranger Things, this whole genre, it was kind of an amalgamation of that. I could see kind of the scenery of that. And of course, any novel set in kind of an Appalachian kind of setting is perfect for this kind of story. So yeah, I was able to get a really nice view, like you said, of just the dialogue and how they might look in my head, which I appreciated. Yeah.
It's funny how you guys are from California. Jennifer's from Connecticut. I'm from Massachusetts. And it seems like we all probably got a little feel for our own backyards as children from this book. And it was based in Georgia or something, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that?
He just knew what
Harper's
small town
Pass,
America
California.
was. Yeah.
And to your point, Daniel, the scenery in this book is super important. It becomes a character on its own. It becomes the map in which we are watching these characters maneuver through, and certain elements like the caterpillars, and the things, the little elements that happen in this, in as it unfolds. And it is and that is where he chooses to focus his description, like you said. And I think that was the perfect idea, because you kind of get this sense of where you are, and you kind of are on the journey with them, even though this is not ever told from a first person perspective.
Right.
Yeah, even I was just thinking that the mad scientist Wadlow, where does Shawn get these names? Is Latravius Wadlow? Awesome. But I was picturing like one of the old painted ladies in San Francisco, and obviously it's not that kind of house, but because that's my backyard, when the kids are sneaking in through the windows and doing all their kind of cloak and dagger stuff, I'm picturing San Francisco, right? Further away. So
the other thing that really struck me about this book is its well-timed small little hints that kind of all come together. The idea that Brooks' sister knows Brady, and and the little hints about what Wadlow and who he is, and you're reading this coming of age story, and yet there's a murder mystery involved in it, and you're getting the pieces. So he kind of does this amazing thing where he mixes like 3 or 4 genres at once, and it just fits. Every little piece fits very well, and there's just distinct moments when that happens.
I think it was great that it came out just as the It remake was coming out too. That was always one of my favorite books when I was a kid. Because I read books like that when I was a kid. But it reminded me so much in the best way of what those kids go through. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Pennywise, but it kind of also reminds me of like the women in Japanese horror movies too, like The Ring and The Grudge. And I don't even know if that movie Mama, if that was like inspired by Japanese, but you get the feeling like that she kind of was. So, but yeah, I totally loved it. Like, it hit every single thing I look for in a story.
Yeah, and it wasn't over the top grotesque. It was definitely something a young boy or a young girl could read and not be overwhelmed by. So he did a good job with that as well. You could definitely tell he was heavily influenced by many different types of horror genres and many different types of authors, and he mixed them well. So you didn't actually sit there and think, oh, okay, this is definitely from this particular author or that author. There was just so many. You kind of got a wide berth of a lot of his influence in one book.
Right, and that made you know, he has his own voice. We could compare him to all these authors that, of course, he's influenced by, but I really got a sense of Shawn's writing through it, which was really cool.
This is all good indicators of a great writer, though, because every single character had a backstory, and it wasn't like he just whaled you with all this backstory every time he introduced one of them. Little bits and pieces of their story came out throughout the entire book, and it was just so well done. It's like, geez, this guy really needs to get out there. I really hope that this book catapults him into a place he should be. I would actually like to see this turn into a movie. I would.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Joe, like you were saying, I'm picturing just scenes in my head as it's going on, like camera pans, right? Like you see the kids on the bikes from above and like, you know, the whole thing. I could really see it.
I mean, just the whole reveal of the collector too. I mean, he really has a grasp for English, and I know that he went to school for that, but it's really, it's not polished to the point where it's like perfectionist polished that it's so like, you know, uptight and squeezed. It's very natural, and it's interesting. I wish I could write that.
A lot of me wonders if it's his education or just a natural talent.
Yeah,
I'm with you, Bill. I don't think I'm the best writer in the world, and I've worked 20 years like hard trying to get this bad.
Right. You know, you could see his interest in there too. I don't know if you know this about Shawn, but he loves Halloween, right? The dude loves Halloween. I interviewed him before Halloween, and he decorates his house like in a scary way, you know, like in a really good, realistic, scary way. And he really gets into it. And you can tell that he loves horror and thrillers and monsters. And it really shows in his work.
It's so funny because if you meet the man, and everybody's seen him on my shows before, but he's very subdued. He's very
very quiet.
Yes. Yeah, you wouldn't picture this twisted mind in there.
Hey, some of the nicest people in the writing community I've ever met, like the sweetest, gentlest, are the horror writers.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, you've got to really, to be able to scare somebody, you have to understand emotions. You have to be a sweet person. You have to understand what it takes to make someone worry, you know, to get that kind of anxiety out of somebody. I don't think you can do that if you're a bad person, to be honest with you.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we love those characters, right? Like we have a connection to every one of them, even the supporting characters. You know, I was worried about them. So you're right. Yeah, that level of kind of empathy. You got to be a good person to be able to scare us and you
develop that kind of compassion in a reader where you care about the character too. You just have to have a certain intuition about you. Like you've got to be a decent guy or a decent woman to be able to write like that.
So, but give us without trying to spoil. I know this is going to be really hard to do, but give those who've never read this book something that they should, under the underlying surface, pay close attention to. Maybe a character, a moment. What do you think early on, and maybe something very early on in the book that they should really keep in the back of their mind when they're reading this book?
For me, it was the bullying. I write a lot of YA, and I do so because I had kind of a troubled childhood, and I try to get to kids while they're young with some of these issues. For instance, in my book, Corpse Lily, I deal with the topic of underage drinking. So with Shawn's book, The Tear Collector, I would like to point out the problem of bullying. So it seems like in today's society, we're trying to force people to not bully. But one thing that we're avoiding, I think, is trying to reach kids about how to deal with bullying. And I like the way he handled it in this book, because not only were they able to deal with the bully in town, the bullies, because there was Myron and Sam, but how sometimes you can create better relationships with these people after you've actually confronted them.
And it's an important moment in the book. It changes a lot of Brooks' direction.
Mm-hmm.
The moment that we all know in the back of our heads
Right.
happened, but that there's a certain moment that really changes the the angle of what goes on. You know?
Right.
Yeah, and again, I think that speaks a lot to Shawn as a person, that even the bullies, you know, they're people and have a story, and they're not just these nasty bad guys, right? In a lot of stories that happens. There's the bullies, they're the bad guys, and that's just who they are. And this story gave a human element to all the characters.
So what moment for you, Shauna, you think people should pay attention to?
Oh gosh, you know, I was like going through my brain. How do you choose? There are so many things. Gosh, I had to kind of, I wanted to, when I finished it, go back to the beginning and get the details about all the supernatural stuff, because it's kind of a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
And not that I missed anything due to the writing. It was just things that I didn't know I should have watched out for, you know, to kind of put the pieces together. So all the little super natural elements kind of keep a little tab running in your head.
Mm-hmm.
How about for you, Jennifer?
Well, to build a little bit off of Daniel's bullying theme, like for me, one of the themes that really stood out and makes it super rereadable too, like Shauna said, is the hints that you get throughout the story. But it all comes from kind of the concept of every act has consequences, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you do something wrong, especially in a work of fiction where, you know, the writer has the leisure to do this and the ability to do this, there will be consequences. There will be justice for what you've done. And sometimes innocent people get swept up in that too, because, you know, you hate someone who hurt you, but are you going to hate everyone connected to that person, even though the one person hurt you? You know, where does it stop? Where does the vengeance stop?
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, really.
Another sign of a good writer is when they can make you think like that.
Yeah, right.
Oh, absolutely.
I would say for myself to pay attention to Margot. That's very important in this story.
That's a good call. Didn't even think of that.
So you guys touched on a little bit your love for some of these ancillary characters that come about, but is there one in particular that you really just want to grab and hug, or you know, push away, or was there one that really you gravitated toward the most?
Yeah, Brady is definitely my favorite character, who I would love to give a hug and tell him everything's going to be all right. You're a hero. You're awesome. Just keep on being you.
Nice.
Yeah, I wanted to bring Brady home and make him homemade dinner, and that poor kid. But I would want to take Latravius out to dinner and pick his brain. That guy was misunderstood, and people thought he was crazy. And here we've got this goo that is pretty, you know, a legitimate clue. And yeah, I really am attracted to those oddball characters, and Wadlow was an oddball. So yeah, I would like to spend time with that one.
For me, it was absolutely Myron, and Myron was Sammy the bully's good friend, and my heart went out to him for reasons that I cannot say here. But before the reasons that my heart went out, he just had the kind of backstory that reminded me of a child that just needed a good influence in his life, and you know, I wanted to see some good things happen to our buddy Myron. That's all.
Another character that it shows such a diverse range in the pace of this story is Detective Holt.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of fun because it'll be like action, and then Holt's kind of like drawing into town. You know, like his parts are important, but it puts a fun kind of pace to the story. And I really loved that character too, and had a picture in my head of like, you know, small town detective type that was just really a good flavor.
Yeah, you felt bad for him too, because all this nonsense was going on, and the only people that knew what was going on couldn't tell him anything because they would have sounded crazy.
Right.
So it also brought you kind of back down the ground while all this nonsense was going on. He was the character that connected you to reality.
Yeah. And the adult perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why do you think everybody should read this book? And who do you think this book is meant for?
My opinion is I think everyone could like it. Everyone. I especially think, for some weird reason, we're going back to nostalgia movies where we're really bringing back the 80s. I think this book is good for nostalgia purposes, but I think kids would also love this book because it's not overly violent. It's not overly graphic. It's got a lot of mystery. It's got that kind of companionship that a lot of kids long for, and it's just got a lot of cool life lessons. It's got the whole stick together, fight through whatever the problem is. And I just think that's a good lesson for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm all about kids. I'm a YA writer.
Nice.
No, I agree. And like Jennifer mentioned, I think I read it in like 5th grade. I was like 10 reading that stuff. And I think that although it is good for everyone, and I loved it. And like I said, I went back and like read through it again. I think that those YA kids are going to love it. I think they're going to, the characters are so relatable, and I think they're going to find themselves in there. So.
How about for you,
Yeah.
Jay?
I think it could go either way. I mean, there's absolutely a strong YA element there with the kids, and I think that would resonate with so many kids today. Like my nieces and nephews would love this book, but there's enough interesting happening on the adult side too that anyone could read this and totally enjoy it and get something out of it.
We all know, or maybe you don't know, but if you don't, you will now. There's a sequel coming. And,
Yes.
and
Oh yes.
so, in your mind, what do you want to see from Shawn in this sequel? Do you think it's going to be like an It thing where we're 20 years later and they're grown up, or do you think you'd like to see it continue from the moment that we're left with?
I personally like to see a prequel. Because when the boys are in the library trying to figure out their history and where this all takes place, what it's all coming from, why it's all happening, they dive into it and they do a good. Shawn dives into it, does a good job, but it left me going, okay, well, what really happened? What is the history of all this, and what's the involvement in the family lineage? So I'd like to see that.
Oh yeah, it goes all the way back, 100 years, or what is it, like 18 something, and
Long time.
Yeah, that was really cool how they figured out that they're like the whole town's practically related, right? And so it would be, you're right, a prequel would be really cool. I don't want to think about anything. I don't want to want anything because I want to see what Shawn comes up with. Whatever he comes up with will be better than whatever I wish he could have.
That's a good point.
Nice. Yeah, that's really good. For you, Jennifer?
Yeah, I would love a prequel and a sequel, because the prequel thing. Well, first off, that's one of my favorite horror tropes anyway, is the when you're reading the story and all of a sudden someone's like, oh, we're going to do some research and we're going to find out, how all of this began. And every time it happens, I'm like, yes, find it out. Give me the secrets. But so I love that part. I would like if it's a direct sequel, I would like if it was still maybe a year later or something. And I'd like to learn more about Devin, because I thought he was a cool addition to their little trio. But it's you feel the other 3 boys a little bit more. And Dev, he seemed really cool, with his skateboard and everything. I'd like to see him develop more.
I will say, and I'm sure everybody will echo here, congratulations to Shawn. This is a triumph and an amazing book. And we're all excited to continue this story and see where it goes. And in your hands, we trust, Shawn. So do us proud and keep it going.
This book, the success could not happen to a nicer guy. So congratulations, Shawn.
On a side note, too, for all my fans that are listening back home, Burgess, the author's name, is the name of my elementary school from my childhood years. This book was meant to be. It's a sign.